Kia ora koutou. So phase 4 of our English curriculum is now out. Now, I mucked around with the draft curriculum, and I've also done a lot of work with the final curriculum to create a bit of a scheme. So I think I know it pretty well. So I thought I'd go over my thoughts about that, sort of, like from a Joe Blogs kind of English teacher's point of view. Joe Blogs, Jane Blogs. So let's get into it. Now, of course, I'm not going to go on negative on you, but I really want to say this. If you're building something, don't you start with the end point in mind, with a design, with knowing what that's going to look like, and then back plan? So shouldn't our curriculum have been planned from year 13 down, but then implemented from year 1 up? It just seems a really illogical way of doing things. And then to fiddle around with year 11 in the middle of all of this, which is in the middle of the system, that seems strange to me as well. Anyway, I just had to get that out. I'm going to start with literacy, which is kind of an aside to what I wanted to discuss, but of course it's not an aside at all. And so because I have made the notes about all of this, I'm going to put on my glasses. So it says in years 9 to 10, literacy instruction, including comprehension and language conventions such as spelling, punctuation, and syntax is embedded. So that to me for high school is about proofreading time every time, proofreading aloud, slowly and with expression, so your prosody there, handwritten notes in books, every period pretty much, keep them in the classroom and mark those books. Targeted teaching, so your starters or your Monday mechanics, plus the practices that I've already mentioned are going to improve your literacy rates like you would not believe. Now, if you can build in reading aloud, and they do mention this on our curriculum as well, in our new curriculum, if you can build in reading aloud at some stage, without embarrassing kids, then that would be gold too, because then they can hear what writing sounds like, they can hear that punctuation. So that's my little thing there about literacy. I'm just going to pop that in there. It's not what I was wanting to talk about today, though, into the curriculum. Okay, so our curriculum has strands, elements, and sub-elements. So it doesn't really make clear what's what, but I'm assuming the strands are our text studies and our language studies. So those are our two things. And our text studies is about, to me, the information that's going in. So the reading of the novel, the poetry, the viewing of the film, and I really want to say listening, but we'll get to that. So what does it say in our teaching sequence guidance? It says students will analyse, interpret and respond to a wide range of literary and non-fiction texts, exploring themes, structures and contexts. I don't know why they've picked out those three things. It seems a little bit random, but never mind. While studying the features of language too. Language, but aren't we doing language studies later on? It's kind of anyway, so that's what we're doing for text studies. So your reading load for the year, in each year, so year 9 and year 10, students must engage meaningfully with at least one novel, one selection of poetry, and you'll see in the footnote in the document that a selection means of varying in length, complexity and theme from one or multiple poets. At least one film or drama text. I'd be doing film in a heartbeat. At least one short story, at least one non-fiction text, so maybe you could get away with doing a little article. Others of any text form. So that's your multimodal spoken. So there's your TED Talks, your podcasts, whatever you like in that regard. So there is a lot to get through in 1 year, and I know that has been a big talking point, and I sat down with my trusty year planner to have a look at when I would get through those if I was still in the classroom. I'm not in the classroom anymore, and you sort of think, well, actually we have to read the novels to the kids. Long gone are the days when I first started teaching, we would be doing not a film unit because that wasn't a thing back then, but say a poetry unit, and then you'd say to the kids, in 3 weeks time we'll be studying the novel. And you give out a novel to everyone, you write down little numbers in your roll book, and so have this read in 3 weeks time, and in 3 weeks time when you're ready to start your novel unit, they've all read the book. But if you're having to read a chapter a lesson, that's going to chew into an awful lot of time. And I think that maybe a little bit of reality checking needs to go in there, or maybe they just need to crack down on behaviour and homes, and I don't know. I'm getting political now. But anyway, that's what you've got to get done in the year. So, maybe those short novels are quite good, and pre-record them, find them on audiobooks. That'll help you get through things as well. For the features of text part, and so let's have a look at my little scribbly bits here. So for the features of text here, you have a look at what they are looking at. So the repetition of working together. So explaining how features of text work together to shape meaning and create effects. So that's for every single genre there, or text form as they call them. So for novel, poetry, short story and things, it's about how features of text work together. Note well, this ties in later with year 10 literary essays, where in their thesis statements, they must link multiple features such as theme, character, or authorial technique. And of course, we know that this feeds into things like 1.1 and 1.3 aspects of text, where they really need to be talking about things that work together. It is a bit disappointing that we've learned that to use that word aspects of text for level 1, and then in the phase 4 they're talking about features of text, and so that inconsistency with vocabulary might be a bit confusing, but I think you just the vibe of the thing, so you just have to run with it. Don't overthink it. That would be the kiss death. Now, along with those text studies, of course, is also the range that you've got to cover. So these include historical, contemporary, seminal text, New Zealand Māori, New Zealand Pākehā authors, New Zealand multicultural authors, world text, popular and youth cultures. Now, to get that all in your head, I suggest that you have a table, list all your novels down one side, and then along here in the columns you can have historical, contemporary, seminal, New Zealand Māori author, New Zealand Pākehā, etc., and then you tick what ones are covered with each of the texts that you have in your resource room. That way you can see if you have got that coverage. That's just a little logistical tip there. In terms of your text complexity, it's just your common sense. Of course, you're choosing a text that has great language, has some stuff that you can do inferencing with. You can make connections with it to yourself, to the real world. That's really important. It's got to be analyzable, basically, and to challenge the thinking of students. But also, to be honest, in my humble opinion, your texts have to be entertaining. They have to grab them, because I know that there's no way when I snuggle into bed at night, I want to read some academic text. And I don't care if that makes me sound like an idiot. I just want something that is going to entertain me, that's going to take me out of the real world. I like my thrillers. I like my stupid, soppy romantic dramas. That's what gets you into reading, not the boring text that, so they've got plenty of meat on their bones, but we're trying to get our kids into reading, and we're not going to draw them in unless we have some blooming entertaining text. So anyway, just had to have my say there. Thank you for listening. Righto, things that you need to cover for your text studies. Pretty much it's business as usual, but there are some things that I know I haven't concentrated on enough, if we're looking at this curriculum in the past, and I would do a little bit more homework on these things now. But generally, business as usual, as I say, your features of the text. So you're looking at them in isolation. It doesn't say that, but I'm telling you to. Characterization, setting, symbolism, all of those things. Look at them in isolation first, and then look at how they work together to, what does it say? Shape, meaning, and create effects. Now, my age-old thing is I stick the idea in the middle. The author is telling us about the idea that, da la la, then you know exactly what it is that they are trying to push, the message that author or director is trying to push. Put that in the middle of a page, and then around it, what are all the things that point to that message? And then you can see how they work together. So that's my little tip there in terms of your planning, but also when you are putting it all together later on for your with your students. So that's your features of text. You are also, of course, looking at the purpose of the text, and with that is the context. Now, some texts I really concentrate on that with. Depends on the text, right? But maybe that can be part of one of the things that you think about when you're getting new texts. And is there a heavy, meaty context in the background here that we could have students connect in with as well? So context is very key. In terms of groups of people, so you're looking at two things about groups of people. So the perspectives and portrayals of different groups of people, so how different groups are illustrated in text, but also in terms of groups of people, you're looking at how different groups interpret this text. Okay, so and analysing that. So just remember in your head, groups of people, how they portrayed, and then how do they receive that text. Evidence is a thing. Obviously, we know that. We've always looked at evidence, but they really specifically state, that they need to interpret that evidence. And so this is year 9, right? Making connections, obviously, between a text and other texts, and with personal experience, obviously, and with the wider world. Again, that meaty stuff, connecting to the wider world, that connects in with your context, of course. So, yeah, you just need the meat behind it. For your year 10s, you're looking at tropes, which is like your figurative language kind of stuff, but also there's two meanings. If you look it up on Grammarly, I'm not going to link it below, but you look it up on Grammarly. There's so many things about tropes online, but it's about your figurative language type stuff, your implied meanings. But it's also, there's a secondary meaning, and that is, to simplify it, your stereotypical things that are plonked in for a specific genre. So how we all like the happy ending and things like that. So you're looking at tropes because you're going to be looking for in year 10 at the literary traditions. So I'm going to have a big think about that, and I'm actually going to do a resource on literary traditions, aiming at year 9 and 10, nothing humongously academic. But I know I did a paper on this at uni, actually, and all I can remember from it is some stuff about Caribbean poetry and the oral tradition there, and some of the things that they did for that. So literary traditions is going to be a focus in year 10. Okay, let's look at language studies. Now, to me, if text studies is about your novels and your poetry and your film and all of that, that's the innie stuff, information coming in. I did this with our old curriculum as well. There was information coming in, like making meaning, and then there's information going out, which is you're creating meaning. So this one's text studies, to me, information coming in, and then the language studies is information going out. But why call it language studies? So to me, this is poorly named. It's writing and presenting visually and orally, and listening, which focuses actually on questioning when you read the practice sort of things. But listening's an innie. So I'm a bit confused. But anyway, even if you looked at writing, presenting visually and orally, why wouldn't you call it something like communicating? I don't know. But I'm still in the innies and outies kind of thing. So anyway, in my opinion. Also, why call it language studies when we study language for the innies, for the text studies? We really focus on language for that. So I know it's playing with language for the language studies, the writing and things, they're playing with language, but they're learning about language for the text studies. So it's all anyway. The other thing with the writing is, my God, communicating, language studies. How many of the text types must students complete? I can't find it anywhere, but maybe you can. And maybe you could put it in the comments below. You'd kind of do all of the writing ones. So that's your discursive, your persuasive, your creative, your literary essays. Of course, you've also got responses to text, but they can be done any way you like. But they've been put under text studies, which is the innie stuff to me, and not the outies stuff. Remember, responses can also be done in any way. They don't have to be written. Anyway, I really do actually like the range of writing that they have stipulated that we have to cover. So discursive, as I said, discursive, persuasive, creative, literary essays, and the responses. Okay, so I think that's a really great range. The discursive, remember, they're looking at different sides to an argument, which again is another thing that we really need to be concentrating on in this day and age in our world, and that's that empathizing and thinking critically and thinking, well, maybe there's another way, so that's really great. And then there's the persuasive. Well, this is what I think. So I think it's a great range there. Fantastic. I like those styles. When the final curriculum came out, I was really excited because I'd seen the draft, so I was familiar with it. Turns out to be a completely different document, really. But also, I love change. I love new things. I embrace it. So when I started reading, I was looking for the verbs. Immediately looking for the verbs. So I'm going to read my notes here. So in the teaching sequence guidance, it says students will analyse, interpret, and respond to a wide range of literary and non-fiction texts. So analyse, interpret, and respond to texts. But further on, under the little working with text heading, under that teaching sequence guidance, teaching sequence notes, under working with text, it says to engage meaningfully with text means more than just reading or listening. It includes students analysing, evaluating, and applying. Now, when I read that first lot of 3 verbs, analyse, interpret, respond, I was like, that's our verbs. But then it says analyse, evaluate, apply. But then you whip down the text studies, features of text, and it says examining, and then under that explaining, and then comparing, evaluating. So a whole lot more verbs. If you look at text studies, context and purpose, it says examining, drawing conclusions, identifying, and interpreting. And in year 10, it's analysing, examining, evaluating. Whip down to interpretations and connections, examining, analysing, and supporting with evidence. Responses, expressing, engaging, considering. So if you are looking for verbs to hang everything on, like we had describe and explain and all of that, I can't remember already, which is a bit sad because we still use those at year 12 and 13, don't we? Anyway, analyse, discuss. If you're looking for verbs to hang your planning on, you can't. There are no verbs. And same with, to hang your assessing on, there are no verbs. You're looking for the concrete things. So forget the verbs. Verbs out. Okay, assessment. If you're just looking at the curriculum document, you need to base it on a mixture of the knowledge and the practice side of things. So remember, you've got your knowledge on this side and your practice on that side. But you actually need to look at both because this is a bit more explanatory, this is a bit more specific, but in an inconsistent way actually. But anyway, so base it on both. That's what I did for my rubrics, which I totally acknowledge. If you have got my rubrics, you will probably want to tweak things. And as the years go on, that the document that I did is obviously going to be an organic document because we tweak as we go with anything like that, and as we learn more and as we try different things and so on, and obviously different strokes for different folks. But anyway, so with your assessment, base it on a mix of the knowledge and practice information that's there. The other thing is that it talks about planning for discursive, persuasive, creative, visual and digital texts. So I'd be getting students to hand those plans and like really focus on how to plan. So they're not just planning their points, but they're adding in the evidence and maybe a few notes as well. Really getting that planning done first, which I think is fantastic. And I would get them to hand that in. If they don't hand in the planning, I'm sorry, we're going to do whatever. I'll keep it PC. But it's interesting, I talk about some mysteries and things later on. They don't mention the planning from what I can remember. For the literary essays, don't you need to plan for those? But anyway, just plan for everything. Year 10 need to up their game with planning. But anyway, you might want to include planning as part of your assessment. And the other thing is there's self and peer reviews, a big thing, particularly at year 10 and taking part in peer reviews. Now that's where if you've got checklists, they come in handy for the students. And maybe some kind of record, some kind of, like put the date on that. Things like your responses where the curriculum says that students need to be prepared to listen to what other people have thought about a text and then to alter their thinking and to review what they had thought before. So it might be a good idea to get them to date those things or have a response book where they write their responses in and then they leave space before the next one so that they can review those. But I don't know how you're going to fit all this in. I mean, it's blue sky thinking that I'm doing here, right? But time is of the essence. Now would be a great time to push SLT to understand that there is a lot to get through, and I'm sorry, but we can't have all the other stuff. Like we're either concentrating on our subject or we're at the gala day. I don't even know. I can't even deal. Anyway, so that's a little bit about assessment there. Okay, so what's the difference between year 9 and 10? Well, year 9 is they've got their thing. So read the year 9 stuff. And then year 10 consolidates that. So you're still doing the same stuff, but you're adding on. Okay, so year 10, here's a general overview. There's more refined planning is expected. So more details, be more strategic for purpose and audience. There is the peer reviewing, self and peer reviewing in particular. Their thesis statements for writing, they need to discuss how multiple features of text work together, which should become second. It's kind of, you do it anyway. For example, blah, 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 character represents an idea or illustrates an idea. That's two things, right? Character and idea. So I would go for something, an idea. More linking of features of, as I say, working together, and of evidence to the idea that you're discussing, and, to the world and all of that, to like really just get in there in the context and things. So a bit more linking and establishing personal voice in their texts and their communicating. In terms of grammar, it's just use punctuation better, including, I'm making sourdough and I've got sourdough on my fingers. Multitasking, including using ellipses, brackets, and the Oxford comma. Now remember, the parentheses are your round brackets for adding extra information in. Your brackets are the square ones. This is the way I understand it anyway, is the square ones where you add information, like you put you change information from a quotation, for example, and the Oxford comma. Did I mention that? Yeah, the Oxford comma. Look at that. Okay. Okay, some things are a bit of a mystery to me. So let's go over my list here. I've already mentioned the verbs. I need some verbs, and there is such a mix there. That's a mystery to me. Formatting. For example, okay, let's look at this. Let's look at this. The headings. Look, and this is sort of just a dumb thing, but it starts playing with your head, all of this kind of stuff. So blah, 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 teaching sequence. Can you see that there? Yeah. And then it says here, teaching sequence guidance. And then there's a whole lot of subheadings under that. But why don't they just say teaching sequence guidance at the top there? And as I say, I know it seems like a silly thing, but never mind. Text studies. Text studies, where is it? What was I going to show you? So here, text studies, there's your strand text studies, but then you've got one little, what do you call it here, substrand element there, but it's the only one. So why not just say that that's text studies? I don't get it. It's like doubling up. Anyway, under text, that's right, under text studies, I think I mentioned this already, maybe, they now call it features of text, as you can see there, features of text, but we also know it as aspects now, so why start calling it features here? That's a mystery to me. Listening is I mentioned before, is in the outie stuff, but listening isn't anything. But then when you read the stuff about listening, it's really about that questioning what you listen to. It's about questioning. So that's outie, I guess. So I don't know. You have to get your head around that. Now, if it was me and I was doing some stuff up for a department, I would go and stick listening under text studies, to be honest, and deal with it that way. Obviously, in the scheme that we have in our shop, we can't do that because we're trying to really keep to that curriculum. But if it was a working document in my department, that's how I would be talking about listening as in any. And the other thing with the listening is, if you're listening and you're formulating questions, why isn't note taking put in as part of this? So that would be an outie, the questioning, formulating questions and note taking. But note taking is not mentioned at all. But I can't listen to anything and think about questions for it if I'm not note taking. So surely that is an essential skill that's part of that. So that's, again, a mystery to me. I've already mentioned as well, why aren't responses under language studies, aka communicating, because that's an outie. And why is language studies called language studies and not something like communicating? Because we study language and text studies as well. We use it, and anyway. And the formatting of language studies, why not just have writing, visual, oral? It's just a weird format. Have I got anything else in my long bullet list? Oh, yes. Audience and purpose falls under crafting text, which makes it appear that we don't think about audience and purpose for the oral communication, presenting and listening. Why aren't we thinking about, like just the way they have formatted it? It does mention audience and purpose and the knowledge parts for the oral presentations, though. But then why didn't they do that in the knowledge parts for the other discursive writing and persuasive writing things? It's really inconsistent kind of organization of this document. What else have I got here? Other little things like under oral communication presenting, they mention structural devices, structural strategies, and structural features. Can we just stick to one word? Under oral communication presenting, they mention using an oral language form, but nothing about language features. But they do mention using sophisticated language features in Year 10. So, again, kind of inconsistent, which is kind of weird when it's in the language studies strand. Under oral communication presenting, they ask students to talk about providing well-researched and credible evidence as part of presenting collectively, so for things like your debating. But it's not there for individual presentations, but surely the students have to research what they're saying. So that they've got a persuasive speech going, but then you could look at your persuasive language stuff there. But I don't know, if you're going to be quite prescriptive, then you've got to be prescriptive all the way through. So I find that really frustrating that I had to keep filling in the gaps all the way through. So for me, if this is going to be a working document, it's got to be formatted, organised, and written as a working document. As I said, if I was in HOD, I might be using a bit of poetic license on some of that stuff. But anyway, just to cap off, it's pretty much business as usual, except as I've mentioned, you focus on that planning, the peer reviewing in some areas mentions planning, in some areas not others. I've already said that. The literary traditions are the thing, your context, your tropes are a thing, and they are also pushing that integration of the innies and outies. And I think for me, that's always been a thing. And the example that they use there is, for example, if the focus is on persuasive writing, teachers might choose speeches or opinion pieces to study. So that's that integration of things there. They also push personal reading, which we've tried to push since forever, but reading for pleasure and reading at home. I think there's some other things that need to be dealt with before we can push that in our curriculum, but it's good to have that to aim for. I think ultimately the crusty old teachers like me, this is your time to shine, because you're going to have to fill in the gaps. You know what it is to teach a text, so you might have to help those beginning teachers through the basics of teaching a text and fill in the gaps that we've got in this curriculum. There is some element of common sense involved there, but if you don't know what you don't know, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. So the older, more experienced teachers, as I say, it's your time to shine. Beware throwing the baby out with the bathwater. As I have said several times now, it's business as usual, but you're just making sure you're focusing on some other things that you might not have focused on before, like your context and your groups of people and all of that. Summary. I am concerned that there may be changes because they have named the document, the online document, the PDF, they've named it October. Well, does that mean there's going to be another one in June 2026, in November 2026? Why would you name it with the date? That's a bit of a worry. And overall, a bit of a Rotten Tomatoes score, I don't know, 27%. I've written here, language and structure does not suit purpose nor audience. Inconsistent language, poorly structured and formatted. Ideas lack clarity. I had to cut myself off there. I know it's unbelievable, but I do rabbit on there for a minute. Anyway, I hope that you have found this valuable, even if it's just more of a conversation. Sometimes though, or a one-sided conversation, but sometimes listening to what other people think about a document helps us understand it and think, put our own thoughts into it then as well. So with understanding, of course, comes confidence. So do print your document out, print your curriculum document out so that you can scribble all over it, highlight it and things. You might even want to, manually chop things up so that, for instance, I might move the listening into the text studies and I might move the responses into the language studies, and then I'd rename language studies, and do not be afraid to play around with it so that it makes sense for you. You're not taking it, you're not you're not destroying the curriculum in any way. It's just making more sense to you. As you may or may not know, we have done up a bit of a scheme. It's editable, so you can put your own spin on it. I'll link that below. Anyway, enjoy, don't stress. You know this stuff already. There's just a couple of little tweaks that you need to make. I've gone over those in the video. There will be no blog on this, by the way. It's just a video. Okay, see you. Bye.